My name is Joe, and I'm the Backlogger. Today I'm going to be doing another game review from my backlog, and today's game is Darksiders Warmastered Edition for PlayStation 4. Darksiders originally came out in the year 2010 for Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and a PC version later that year. It was published by THQ and developed by Vigil Games. Vigil Games appears to not be around anymore, and after that company went bankrupt, developers from that company went on to other companies. The remastered edition of Darksiders, titled Warmastered Edition, came out in the year 2016 for PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC. It was published by THQ Nordic and developed by Kaiko. Kaiko. I think that's how you say it. Not exactly sure. Kaiko also remastered a few other games such as Red Faction Guerrilla and Legend of K. I remember playing Darksiders not long after it originally came out, and I probably only played the first half hour until I got distracted with some other games because I just didn't feel like playing a God of War style game at the time. And I'm telling you, this game is very similar to the old God of War series on PlayStation 2. Ever since these games got released on PlayStation 4, I've been wanting to go back and play Darksiders 1 and 2. I'm also planning on playing Darksiders 3, which came out not too long ago. And it'd be a good time to play them all because Darksiders Genesis is coming out very soon. What's great about Darksiders Warmastered Edition is that it gives the game a slight graphical upgrade. It displays at 1080p resolution, and it runs very well on the PlayStation 4 at 60 frames per second. Even with the improved textures, frame rate, and resolution, it's still noticeable that this is a previous generation game with just a slight graphical upgrade, but I personally am more than fine with how this game looks, even if the textures and visuals look a bit dated. In Darksiders, you play as War, a horseman of the apocalypse who was summoned to take part in the end war alongside the three other horsemen. After being summoned, it appears that none of the other horsemen were summoned, which leads to the Charred Council, an organization responsible for maintaining balance and order in the universe, accusing War of bringing about the apocalypse on his own and siding with the forces of hell. War swears that he is innocent and that someone else is behind this, so the council strips him of his powers and sends him off on his journey to prove his innocence. Even though a lot of the dialogue isn't all that interesting, and mostly offers nothing beyond exposition, the voice acting is good and includes talented voice actors like Mark Hamill and Troy Baker. Yes, Mark Hamill and Troy Baker voicing video game characters. Who would have thought? But yeah, even though the story is not the most intriguing, I did have a great time getting through this game and watching all the cutscenes and meeting all sorts of different characters with their own unique designs. They all look very cool. During my entire playthrough, I couldn't help but constantly think of the old God of War series on PlayStation 2, which this game borrows so many elements from. It also takes inspiration from games like Castlevania, Devil May Cry, and even a little bit of The Legend of Zelda. I noticed a lot of other reviewers saying this game is basically like Zelda, which I see those elements in this game, but I actually really don't think this game is all that much like that series. It's so much different, I think. But mainly, this game really is so much like God of War. And let me explain why. Games similar to God of War, or God of War clones, were pretty common during this time in the mid to late 2000s after the success of the first two God of War games. We had games like Dante's Inferno, Heavenly Sword, and Castlevania Lords of Shadow, and for Darksiders, like in God of War, you use strong attacks to destroy enemies. Use the circle button to grab an enemy when the circle indicator appears above their heads after weakening them. Find chests with items that will increase your health or power when gained enough pieces. Use soul points gained from defeated enemies to increase your power and get new abilities. Push large objects around as well as use a strong attack to hit them far forward ahead. Climb walls and hit enemies while hanging as well as give yourself a boost to climb faster. Swim in water and being able to boost yourself forward. Also, like in God of War, the game keeps track of your combo count. And as far as the story goes, you're stripped of your powers like in God of War 2. Also, in God of War, you play as a guy who becomes the God of War, and in this, you play as a horseman named War. God of War. War. There you go. Alright, I'll stop saying God of War. And if I say it again, someone can punch me. So, by comparing these two games, I'm not crapping on Darksiders at all. I actually really like this game. And it's very common in this business for a developer to take ideas from another game and incorporate them into their own game and kind of add their own little twist to it. And clones of other games is just something that happens a lot. And I'm totally okay with like copies of other games as long as the game's fun. But is Darksiders fun? Yes, it really is. This game stands on its own and it is a very fun action game. The main character, War, controls very well. His attacks are quick, fluid, and each strike to an enemy has a good impact to it. War basically feels like you're playing as the Hulk, with huge armor on him and a giant sword. In addition to the main sword weapon, you'll gain more weapons as you progress, and you'll be able to use a merchant to add new moves to each weapon, as well as make them more powerful. You'll also get abilities that allow you to use what are basically like spells to do things like protect yourself temporarily, or create destruction around you and destroy a bunch of enemies. With those newer weapons you get, you can put them into a secondary weapon slot, which is very useful, and it lets you use a different weapon with a different button for attacks depending on your situation. It's one of those games where killing enemies just feels right, and after each battle, it makes you, the player, feel like nothing less than a complete badass. Along with defeating all the normal enemies throughout the game, there are also several boss fights, which are pretty fun, and are often very puzzle-like, where you have to figure out specifically how to beat them and which weapon you're supposed to use, and basically what their weak spot is. There's also this powerful ability you can use called Chaos Form. As you defeat enemies, your Chaos meter will fill up, and when it's completely full, you can change into what looks like a giant demon. This ability reminds me very much of the one in God of... Thank you. As I was saying. But yeah, it's a really cool ability that you can use when you're in tough situations and you just need to get a bunch of enemies out of your way. The only problem with it is that after you die, it doesn't reset. So after a few deaths, your meter will still fill up, and it allows you to use the ability pretty much any time as long as you let yourself die over and over. I actually had to try and refrain from using it a couple times because it just felt cheap even though the game allowed for it. But even without this ability, the game's really not all that difficult, I don't think. But then again, I kind of have a lot of experience with these type of action hack and slash games, so it's pretty easy for me to get used to it after a while. But the difficulty overall was pretty fine. As you progress through the game, you'll want to go back to previous areas to find more upgrades, which adds that Metroidvania element to the mix. There are certain times where the main game requires you to go back to previous areas, which are perfect times to search for any new upgrades you missed, so the game will provide you with the opportunity to go back and find more upgrades. So, should you add Darksiders Warmastered Edition to your backlog? Well, even though the game will feel familiar and the story and characters really aren't anything special, the game has very few flaws, and the flaws it does have really don't interfere all that much with the overall experience. And even though the game will feel very similar to other games, I still think there's plenty that this game has to offer, and if it's a high quality action hack and slash game you're looking for, this game will give you what you want. It's certainly what I wanted, and because of that, I would give Darksiders Warmastered Edition a B. Backlog. I'm not expecting a whole lot with Darksiders 2, but I am hoping it will be another great time, and it might be interesting to see where the story goes, as well as seeing if any extra depth and strategy has been added to the combat. But even if it ends up being more of the same, I think I'll still be happy. And with that said, let's cross this game off the list. Alright viewers, now I want to hear from you. What is your history with Darksiders Warmastered Edition for PlayStation 4 and Xbox One? Have you heard of this game? Is it in your backlog? And also, do you think this game is more similar to the God of War series on PlayStation 2, or more similar to Legend of Zelda? Well, go ahead and discuss in the comments below. Also, if you like this video, you can subscribe to this channel for more backlog gaming reviews I do. Your support is appreciated. Thank you so much for watching my review for Darksiders Warmastered Edition. I hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, keep on backlogging.